beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Andy McNay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and a very, very happy New Year to you. I'm very grateful for the chance to have this debate, and I thank the Minister for her attendance this afternoon and for her work on this subject across the years, and including the upcoming work on the road safety strategy. Madam Deputy Speaker, I request this debate today because our current approach to road safety is in desperate need of overhaul. Whilst a few local authorities have robust, innovative approaches to road safety, too many others lack resources or political will to implement proactive safety measures, making road safety increasingly a postcode lottery issue. Safety interventions too often come as a response to collisions rather than as a proactive measure to prevent them. We don't listen to our communities and have failed to invest or learn from international best practice. As a result, progress in reducing road deaths has largely plateaued in recent years. The UK has passed a grim and shaming milestone. 500,000 people have died on the roads of Great Britain since 1926, when records began. That's more than the number of UK citizens who have been killed as a result of warfare over that period, and that includes the Second World War. Now, I'm well aware this is a complex and multidimensional issue and not something we can do justice to in a short debate like this. So rather than trying to address every aspect of road safety, I will instead seek to focus on a couple of linked aspects that are of particular concern to the residents of my constituency of Rossendale and Darwen, specifically speeding and issues related to large commercial vehicles. Rossendale and Darwen is a constituency of A roads running down valleys, with most residential and commercial developments extending along these lines with relatively few alternative routes. I live off Burnley Road in Bacup, and the lived experience of residents along this road serves to highlight most of the issues that I want to raise here. Ask anyone that lives on Burnley Road and they will tell you speeding is endemic. There have been serious injuries and fatalities, but more fundamentally, residents will cite numerous close calls and the fear this generates. For example, one house on a bend in a road has now been hit by speeding vehicles 3 times. In one case, a vehicle impacted on the spot where a pedestrian had been standing just seconds before. And when we lived on a main road, a car judged to be speeding at over 100 miles an hour hit my wife's car with such force it was lifted up and landed on mine, and that was in the 30-mile-an-hour zone. And there are many more stories like that. Indeed, just this morning, constituents contacted me about a particularly serious close call, which I can't detail now because it may go to court. To compound this, the road is very heavily used by large commercial vehicles. There have been numerous... I will, it'll be a pleasure.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I commend the Honourable Gentleman for Rossendale and Darwen for bringing this forward, and I spoke to him beforehand through 2 or 3 different people, but I got to him eventually. But I can just say that when it comes, I was intrigued by the debate, intervention, road safety and community involvement, simply because in my constituency back in October of last year, we had a double-decker bus taking children from school that travels along the Ballyblack Road, outside Cargo, going towards Bangor, Newton Ards, and it fell over. Thank goodness, Madam Deputy Speaker, nobody was killed, but there was some children injured. And the point I wanted to make in relation to it, because I think it's important, I think it fits in with the Honourable Gentleman's debate, while you must have ongoing road safety and infrastructure projects in place, what you also need is a community involvement when it comes to safety. And it was the community that responded to the debate. It was the nurses on the road, it was the doctors on the road, it was the farmers that came across the fields. Community involvement is really important. If you want to improve safety, then you must have the community tied in.
I fully agree with the Honourable Gentleman. Indeed, that is the main subject that I'll try and focus on today. I think it's hugely important, and we have to listen to our communities, because in the end our communities not only know best, but they're the ones that experience the consequences of these decisions. To return to the subject, to compound the road is very heavily used by large commercial vehicles. There have been numerous close calls with these two. Residents will see these vehicles speeding, travelling in convoy, and too often the driver's on a mobile phone. This is a massive concern around the local primary school, which, like many in Rossendale and Darwen, is sited directly on the main road. Indeed, last year 2 big wagons managed to crash into each other just outside the school. Narrow pavements and lack of safe crossing areas further increase this risk, and it's hardly a surprise that many parents are reluctant to let their kids walk even a short distance to school, and I can't think of anyone that rides a bike there.
Where do you
Oh, my goodness.
I thank the honourable member for my honourable friend for giving way. In my constituency of South Derbyshire, we have the busy A444 that runs from Stanton right through to Akersford, which is on the border with North West Leicestershire, and it has varying speed limits across its journey. It is a huge concern to the community. We have large articulated lorries travelling very fast through that road, sometimes on very, very skinny roads. We also have a school closer to Stanton, a primary school, where there is no close Pelican crossing. There is no safe way for families with young children to cross the road to get their children for school. And actually my community feel very much like highways don't listen, like the sense between the speed limits don't listen. And that A44 has got varying speed limits across the duration of the length of that road. So I wonder if my honourable friend agrees with me that actually maybe it's a time for us to work with local communities to reconsider their involvement with how rules are made for how we apply speed limits and where we put crossings.
I agree with my honourable friend 100%, and she's put the example tremendously well. And I think it's the greatest fear that most of us have, is that combination of primary schools and unsafe roads and large vehicles. You sadly could only end in one way. I shall give way to my friend here.
I'm grateful to you, to the honourable member for giving way. So a constituent of mine lost her son, Alan, in a dreadful accident on the A14 in September last year. He died in a collision with a lorry which was stationary on a live lane. The lorry driver was disqualified from driving and had no MOT on his trailer and no insurance. Despite the driver committing offences in road safety, the CPS determined the driver did not cause the death under current legislation, and the driver was only charged with disqualified driving. Would the Minister commit to examining the Road Traffic Act 1988 with a view to the introduction of offence focused on the presence rather than causing, suggesting a wording, a person being disqualified from driving?
I'm just going to make the point to members that interventions are getting very long. Now, we have some hours to conclude this debate, and therefore if members wished to make a full contribution, they would be able to, rather than simply making an intervention. Andy McNay.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And my honourable friend raises a hugely important issue, and this question of commercial vehicles and the regulation of commercial vehicles and the level of responsibility which companies and employers take for their drivers is a crucial part of this debate. So to return to the story of Burnley Road in Rosendale, I've described the various incidents we've seen, the various close calls, and we bring all this together, and a very obvious conclusion that residents reach, including myself, is that without further action, further deaths and serious injuries are inevitable, as we said. And so that's a great fear that we have, is that everyone can see it coming, and when it comes, and there's been no action, I think we'll all feel that we have failed.
Would my honourable friend give way?
I would.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd like to thank my honourable friend, the member for Rossendale and Darwin, for bringing this debate forward. It's hugely important, and I'm really pleased to see my honourable friend, the member for Nuneaton, here as well, as we share on the edge of our constituency one of the most dangerous road junctions in the country, at the end of Woodford Lane and the A5 in Manchester. Too often, our communities know that dangerous accidents happen there on a far too regular basis. Fatalities and serious injuries requiring attendance from air ambulance as well as other crews. Would the honourable member agree with me that it is our communities that know best in terms of implementing preventative strategies for road safety rather than waiting for yet more lives to be lost before we actually do something about it?
Yes, thank you. And I agree with my honourable friend again 100%. This role of community is absolutely vital in this. And I would.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm very grateful to the honourable gentleman for giving way. In my own area, there's a serious problem with a lack of cooperation between Oxfordshire County Councils and neighbouring local authority and Reading Borough. Sadly, Oxfordshire, despite requests from Reading, have allowed HGVs to go through a Reading suburb called Caversham and into Reading Town Centre when they could be diverted on much safer routes, and there have been repeated requests for Oxfordshire to perhaps work more constructively with Reading. Would the honourable gentleman agree with me that there should be greater emphasis on cooperation between neighbouring local authorities as part of this preventative approach which he's so ably describing today, to try to avoid unnecessary injuries and deaths?
Absolutely, and I do feel, and I'll touch on this later, that devolution and potential local government reorganisation that creates a huge opportunity to bringing new levels of cooperation between those authorities, and we should have no hard borders when it comes to road safety. Again, to seek to make some progress. As I said, the conclusion that we reach is that we need action to prevent deaths and injuries. And yet when a community raise their concerns, raise their real-world experience with the county council and the police, we're told that KSI data, that means killed and serious injury data, doesn't meet the threshold for speed cameras and other meaningful interventions.
On that point,
I would.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Does he agree with me that too often an accident waiting to happen has been forced to become an accident that has happened before action is taken? And when it comes to communities knowing that a road that they live on, that they live with every day is unsafe, we should listen to those communities much more and act before the accident happens.
I agree entirely. Entirely, and again, it is devastating for a community to raise those issues, to raise them repeatedly and stridently and sometimes desperately, and yet to feel they're not being heard. And the message they get when it comes back is effectively, we have to wait for someone to get killed before we do anything, and that surely is not the message that our community should be hearing. As well as Burnley Road in Rossendale, I could tell stories about Tobden Road, Burnley Road East through Whitewall Bottom, Market Street in Whitworth, Bury Road in Edenfield, Newchurch Road in Waterfoot, Bolton Road, Sunnyhurst Lane, Hollins Grove and Pole Lane in Darwin. In each case, residents see close calls day by day, but are told by the statistics that they don't merit action. Or even when they do, they're simply told there's no money. This approach is nonsensical and out of line with even the County Council's own adopted Vision Zero strategy, and is decades behind those employed internationally. Ultimately, it costs lives and money. And beyond this, unsafe roads have far-reaching impacts affecting the area's sense of place and identity. They take lives, devastate families, and shake up communities. Roads felt to be unsafe have a significant impact on the day-to-day lives of people who live near them. Residents feel less able to get around, uncomfortable on their own doorstep, and cut off from each other. And this feeling of being...
Wait on that point?
I would.
Thank you. I thank my honourable friend for giving way. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and for having this debate on such an important subject. There seems to be a common denominator here in many of the comments that we're making, and that is the significance of rural areas. I note that his constituency is large rural areas, as does mine in North Northumberland. And so does he agree with me that there is a particular challenge, whether it be rural B roads or even sometimes major national roads of national infrastructure such as the A1 that's in my constituency, where the issue of the type of vehicles that are on the roads and the proximity to small local communities makes them particularly unsafe, and that should therefore be a priority for our national road safety strategy?
Absolutely, and those communities feel particularly vulnerable and particularly under threat. And I said it's that mixture, I think, of rural roads, coupled with those speed limits, and then compact villages sitting along those roads with those changes in road conditions. I would love to.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. On that point about rural roads, there's also the issue that rural roads are often windy, unlit, poorly maintained, all of which requires additional driving skills. And we find in my constituency of Shrewsbury that many young drivers particularly find themselves needing to drive at 17 to access education or other opportunities. And we have a higher prevalence of young drivers being killed, particularly Harvey Owen in my constituency, one of 4 boys killed on their way to Wales after only passing their test after 1 week. And actually more than 1,500 young people are killed every year.
The Honourable Lady might not have been here to hear my earlier comment that there is plenty of time for members to make speeches if they so choose. This debate doesn't need to conclude until 7:30. But we really mustn't have pre-prepared speeches read out in the guise of an intervention. Andy Whitney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Again, the point is extremely well made and vital, and I'll touch on this again later, but the issues of young drivers is a hugely important issue, and I think one that merits a debate in its own right, frankly. To talk briefly about this feeling of being safe or unsafe on roads and the impacts that it has. We can take the example of active travel. The biggest reason why people don't walk or cycle to work or school is concern over road safety. This forces people to travel by car with all the impacts it brings, accentuating all the issues that we're talking about now. Or older people.
Can you give me on that point?
I would.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've caught you the point of change. Feels like a part of Doctor Who. So apologies, I was speaking out loud there, thinking out loud. I thank the Honourable Gentleman for giving way. I know this is a really important subject to his constituents. I really do believe, on the point of active travel, I really do believe that good habits start early in life, and I think that's particularly true of walking and cycling. In Edinburgh South West, parents and also residents are keen to work with the council to make it easier and safer for children to walk to Nether Curry Primary School. And they're really open to collaboration. And I really do think, and I hope the Honourable Gentleman agrees with me on this point, that if we're serious about tackling road safety issues in rural areas, in our towns and in our cities, that really we have to work with our school communities to make sure it's absolutely embedded in them.
Absolutely agreed. And this is, again, a hugely important issue, and it's one where I think, like many areas, we know the solutions. There is fantastic work done by organisations like Active Travel England and others that detail the solutions, and yet our current or past funding structures make it incredibly difficult. I'm campaigning in our constituency for a safe path to a school, and yet find there's essentially no dedicated funding opportunities to meet that very obvious and stark need. So I think it's an absolutely crucial area. I mentioned active travel, but then also older people. Speaking to residents in social housing along New Church Road in Rosendale, they feel trapped in their estate because there is literally nowhere safe to cross the road near them to reach the amenities that they need. Just taking an overall viewpoint, in 2023 there were 1,624 road deaths in Great Britain and 132,977 casualties in total. Pedestrians, cyclists and motorcyclists still make up a disproportionate share of those killed or seriously injured on UK roads. DfT estimates suggest that the annual cost of reported road collisions is around £43 billion. We cannot afford any of these costs. So what do we do about it? We know the basic principles, and indeed we've touched on these in this debate so far, many members raising these quite brilliantly. Many local authorities have adopted strategies based around Vision Zero, which is an approach originally adopted in countries like Sweden and Netherlands, which emphasises that no level of death or serious injury is acceptable on the roads. It's focused on prevention, protection and post-collision response, coupled with evidence-based targets and robust safety performance indicators. We know that such approaches can be effective and save a great deal of money over the long term, but as we have seen and heard, there seems to be a huge gap between strategy and practical implementation. If we want to be serious about tackling this issue, we must move towards a truly proactive, community-led approach to road safety that's informed by statistics and not led by them. In such a model, rather than claiming that a centrally held database knows better, we trust the instincts, experience and wishes of those who use the roads every day. Instead of waiting around until enough people have been hurt to merit intervention, we proactively identify high-risk areas and we act. An excellent example of this approach in action can be seen in the Netherlands. Over the past decade, both Rotterdam and The Hague have been using an algorithm to determine the likelihood of crashes on their roads. The model considered a range of factors, including past crashes, traffic flow, the features of the road, and the presence of on-road parking, amongst other factors. Out of this, it creates a risk rating for each road. Yet, crucially, this rating informs rather than leads the local authorities' decisions. Community experience and input is a key factor in the decision-making process. Ratings are combined with analysis of the volumes and severity of complaints the authorities receive regarding specific roads. Out of this community-led, data-informed model, local authorities choose proactively to intervene to protect their citizens. I would.
Thank you for giving way, and thank you so much for securing this really important debate. This is very personal to me. I lost my own grandfather in a road traffic accident, in fact before I was even born, and my grandmother was left with disability. In my constituency in Shipley there were 183 road casualties in 2023, and one of those was fatal. The Honourable friend mentions Vision Zero. So in West Yorkshire they have a partnership, Vision Zero, which is looking to eliminate, as you say, all traffic fatalities and injuries by 2040. It does bring together the combined authority with local authority, emergency services and national highways, as well as victim support and road safety campaigners, on your point about community. So I would just want to say, is there still a place, I would suggest that there is, for these Vision Zero partnerships alongside the community approaches that he's advocating? Thank you.
Point. Andy McNee.
Yeah, no, I agree fully. And I think there's no sort of conflict between Vision Zero approach and sort of community-led approach I'm talking about. And I think the issue is actually that whilst Vision Zero has been adopted by many local authorities, the implementation falls far short of the intent of Vision Zero. And so it's a question of finding the appropriate implementation and delivery mechanisms rather than just rehashing the strategy. So as well as the model I mentioned in the Netherlands, similar preventative work is being pioneered by researchers using automatically collected data from car sensors to identify dangerous sections of roads. And this is really quite interesting because it collects data that KSI stats don't highlight. They collect real-world data where cars harshly and suddenly brake. These models have proven effective at predicting areas of danger, and such systems could be used to proactively examine hotspots before collisions occur, taking account of near misses and validating experiences of communities like ours. I would.
The member for giving way and for bringing this very important debate. In my constituency of Gordon and Buchan, the A96, which goes from Aberdeen to Huntly and up to Inverness, and also the A90 north of Ellen, are known as accident black spots. On these roads, we know that local residents are not going out, not just because of the fear of an accident, but also, therefore, it's impacting things like our local economy, but also emergency vehicle response times. Does the member agree that things like emergency response times and local economic impacts should be part of the basis of assessments of where safety improvements should be put in on roads across the country?
Very much thank you for the point. This question about how we value road safety interventions must recognise the full gamut of those impacts. And I think far too often we've used very, very narrow measures of cost-benefit. But things like, I say, emergency response and those impacts on wider infrastructure and just that general feeling of being unsafe, I think are hugely important considerations. What I've tried to do is to highlight a few approaches to identifying areas of risk proactively before those collisions occur. Again, we know how to do this. And so with those risks identified, what we also have is a range of effective and advanced interventions that we can utilise to actually then reduce the risk of those incidents. Average speed cameras have been proven to be particularly effective, yet due to fears around cost and lack of awareness on the advances of technology, many authorities have been reluctant to implement them. Looking at evidence, a review by the RSC Foundation found that nationally there was 36.4% reduction in serious or fatal injuries on sites with average speed cameras installed, with a further 16% in reduction of incidents of all severities. In some cases, the installation of speed cameras have reduced incidents by up to 86%. With Lancashire County Council valuing the cost of a road-related facility at £2 million, I don't know quite how they get to that figure, but nonetheless that's the figure being used. It's no surprise that effective measures, safety measures like these, save the government money in the long term. The College of Policing has found through a reduction in medical treatment and repair fees, the financial benefits of these schemes exceed their cost by just 3 to 1. And on the point that the member made opposite, that's on a very, very narrow basis, not recognising perhaps some of the wider impacts, but the figure only increases when you look at benefits beyond 5 years as well. So I would urge the Minister to use the upcoming strategy to stress the significant long-term benefits of proactively implementing speed reduction schemes, like average speed cameras. I will.
You talk about a number of intervention schemes. Have you had a look at the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit that was put into Wales in 2023 in September? Companies like Esure Insurance have said it's reduced the risk, but it's also beginning to reduce the risk of the premiums that people paid in residential areas. So we don't just all have very long roads and fast roads in our constituencies, but also residential areas, and putting that 20-mile-an-hour speed limit in and the impact.
Thank you. Yes, and there's no doubt that the sort of proactive use of speed limits is a crucial part of this, as long as they're targeted and appropriate. However, I would cite a need for effective enforcement along with it, because if people feel there's no consequences from breaking those speed limits, then they are broken. So enforcement, I think, is a crucial part of the consideration. and so you're continuing to focus on average speed cameras. I'd urge the Minister to consider how information sharing between authorities regarding best practice could also be improved. As the College of Policing has noted, and I think myself and other colleagues see all the time, there's significant variation in the methods used to implement average speed cameras or assess their validity. Many authorities are unaware of the significant cost-saving measures that have been pioneered over the last decade or the new technologies that exist. To take one example, we were told by Lancashire County Council that a relatively small average speed system on one key road in Rosendale was unviable. It would cost many millions to implement and maintain. Yet when we approached a Home Office approved supply that was recommended by another local authority that was seen as being a pioneer in this area, we were given a quote of £800,000, not just for that one scheme, but for 3 others that covered all the key risk areas in Rosendale. That is a huge disparity and demonstrates not only how funding might be used efficiently, but also how local authorities are unnecessarily being held back from implementing schemes by, frankly, an out-of-date view on the cost of doing it. But we do need to recognise cost is a genuine factor, and that funding models under the previous government were wholly inadequate, with road safety budgets being squeezed alongside other local authority budgets. Under the last Labour government, we had a system of netting off road fines, and that did help fund road safety enforcement activities. I do believe this should be reviewed as a possible funding stream to pay for road safety improvements, increase police numbers and making the best use of new and existing technology to reduce road risk. With increased information sharing, clarity over costs of such schemes and hypothecated funds, there is significant potential to reduce the obstacles to enforcement that local authorities believe that they face. And in addition to these speed reduction measures, major gains can be made through improving pavements and creating cycling lanes through a genuine safe system approach. Shockingly, of all road deaths, 25% of them in 2023 were pedestrians, with 5% being cyclists. Despite many local Vision Zero strategies, our road safety design evidently fails to protect those vulnerable users. And so I'd urge the Minister to use the upcoming strategy to encourage councils to meet their ambitions with action, utilising support from Active Travel England and genuinely adopt safe system approaches. This requires proactive interventions, whether through establishing clearer and protected cycle lanes, constructing safe footways, or building new traffic lights and crossings where they are needed. Now another key area that we can tackle is the safety of commercial vehicles, as we've touched on already. As I mentioned previously, there are schools in my constituency that border dangerous roads that are frequently used by large commercial vehicles. Due to the force of impacts, HGVs are the second most dangerous vehicles on the road, killing 6.9 people per billion passenger miles, significantly higher than the 1.6 comparative figure for cars. Considering this, it's completely unacceptable that in 2023, 36% of lorries were seen to exceed the speed limit. Drivers often have minimal oversight and training from their companies, with weak corporate safety standards. We must proactively recognise and respond to the heightened risks such vehicles pose. And one crucial step could be incentivise companies to maintain high safety standards in their fleets, be that through offering lower insurance for companies that demonstrate best practice, naming and shaming companies that do not, or even making companies fully reliable for work-related collisions. Alongside this, there are a variety of other proactive low-cost methods that could be used to improve the safety of our roads. For instance, tightening regulations on tyre safety. Poor tyres accentuate the impact of speeding or poor driving. Over the last decade, an average of 182 people have been killed or seriously injured per year because of poor tyre conditions. MOTs annually flag over 2 million cars with substandard tyres, 1 million of which are so poor they're considered actively dangerous. And given the improvements in tyre technology, coupled with the fact that the highest proportion of serious incidents occur in the winter months, I would also believe there is room for the Minister to consider mandating that all new vehicles be equipped with all-season tyres. More generally, there are significant contributions to be offered by safe vehicle technologies, and these can be embedded through advanced vehicle safety regulations. And to touch on the point raised earlier, another area is, of course, driver education, and particularly protecting young drivers. This is a complex area and one that needs a debate in its own right. But there can be no doubt that given that 16% of car driver fatalities are younger drivers, this area really does need attention. And then finally, increasing devolution, as we've touched on, is also central to ensuring communities' voices are heard. In places like Lancashire, road safety interventions are still determined on a county level, and officials and county councillors are often very far removed from the roads and communities impacted by their decisions. When this responsibility is held on a unitary level, voices of communities are louder and decision makers much closer to the area in question. With a widespread local government reorganisation coming in this Parliament, the Minister has a significant opportunity to establish best practice in new unitary and combined authorities. And I would urge the Minister to seize this unique opportunity and provide meaningful support and guidance to these emerging authorities. To wrap up, considering the reactive and inefficient approach to road safety that the Minister has inherited from the previous government, I would urge her to utilise her upcoming road safety strategy to move the country towards a preventative, community-led and statistics-informed model of road safety alongside a sustainable funding approach. Central to this approach, I would call for the following measures to be given detailed consideration within the road safety strategy. Number one, ending the postcode lottery via a robust mandated national road safety strategy based on community-led, data-informed safe system approach. Within this, prioritising lived experience and perceptions of safety over arm's-length data.
Would you give way just briefly on that?
I would.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very grateful for giving to the member for giving way. Just on data use, it was touched on earlier in the speech. As a councillor in Farnley and Wortley and now as an MP for Leeds South West and Morley, I found that when I was trying to help residents with accident spots, with problem roads, I was often told that the mean average speed on that road wasn't high enough for action to be warranted. And I've been met with that excuse so many times now, too many times to count. Like I said, as both a councillor as an MP, does he agree that we need to move away from that? Of course we should rely on data, but of course we should also speak to the people who live next to those accident spots so that we can deal with them properly.
Absolutely, and of course that's the essence of what we're talking about here. We could ask ourselves the question, given that average speed data is a blunt tool anyway, who knows best? The people that live on that road and see and experience it every single day, and someone sitting looking at an algorithm in County Hall far away. And the answer we should give as politicians and representatives of our constituents is it's the community that knows best, and we should be putting systems to support them and support their everyday lived experience, and not the other way around. So, point two. Linked to point one, using the opportunity presented by devolution and local government reorganisation to embed best practice, including improving information sharing between authorities regarding the availability of new and emerging road safety technologies. 3, addressing barriers to proactive implementation of enforcement measures, particularly average speed cameras. 4, developing a sustainable funding model based on bringing back netting off. 5, making companies fully responsible for the action of their drivers when on public roads. 6, a genuine safe system approach to road and pavement design to protect pedestrians and cyclists. And 7, finally, you'll be glad to hear, addressing accentuating factors via advanced vehicle safety regulations, and developing approaches to protect young drivers. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
So much. I'm looking forward to hearing the Minister's response, as road safety is a big issue in the Sussex world. But before I call the Minister, I am told that there are 3 very short contributions from backbench MPs. My worry is there are further people standing that I'm not alerted to, so they will quickly, in the appropriate way, need to make their way to the chair and make it clear what they are trying to do. But contributions will be short, and I call my fellow Brummie first, Paula Hamilton.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I thank the member for Rossendale and Darwin, I hope I've got that right, for securing this important debate. This issue of road safety is vital, and we also need a sustainable funding model. Local councils are a key player in improving prevention-based road safety. Many honourable members and right honourable members who are in this place and not in this place have been talking about... this afternoon I've heard a lot about rural settings, but my constituency is in the middle of the city. And the problems that are occurring within the cities are just as bad. People are veering from the main roads and they're going onto side streets. And the example that I'd like to share is relating to an incident this morning. This morning in my constituency of Birmingham, Erdington, yet another vehicle struck the bridge on Summer Road following a recent incident where the truck collided with the same bridge, and this time it overturned. This is the 3rd such occurrence since last November, and it's simply unacceptable. Would the Minister agree with me that the local council needs to step up and implement measures to address this issue, not only to prevent severe disruption that keeps occurring caused by these accidents, but also to ensure that the safety of other road users and pedestrians are adhered to? My time as a nurse has taught me that prevention is better than cure, and it's much better to take measures now than to risk the safety of local residents in areas across this country. Thank you, and thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much. Short and sweet, very grateful. John Slinger.
Deputy Speaker, and I will also try to be short and sweet. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Rosendale and Darwin, for bringing forth such an important subject. And he alluded in his excellent speech to the sheer number of fatalities. And it's perhaps worth us reflecting on the fact that there are 3 times the number of road fatalities than homicides in an average year, which is something that we could all bear in mind as we go about our driving on the roads. I want to draw attention to the importance of listening to members of our constituencies who have sadly suffered from the trauma of losing someone in a road traffic collision. And I have in my constituency Gioletta and George Galley Atkinson, who have run for 26 years now the Livia Award that recognises the professionalism and service to justice of police officers. And I had the honour of speaking at the 26th award ceremony at the Metropolitan Police Headquarters this year. They lost this award. These awards are in memory of their daughter, who was sadly killed by a dangerous driver. Now, I mention that because I believe that it's incumbent on us to listen to the voices of those who've suffered the trauma and devastation of such unnecessary preventable deaths. We need to hear their words and act on them. And community involvement is absolutely critical. And I will conclude by saying that we must get across the message to our constituents that road collisions are not, in all but the smallest number, accidents. They are not accidents. They are preventable. They are avoidable. So we all must take responsibility. The national government, of course, and I know that my honourable friend, the Minister, takes these issues very seriously, must tighten the law wherever it can. And I know that my honourable friend, the Minister, is looking at various ways to do this. And indeed we must look to fund local authorities in the excellent work that they do to help increase road safety. We must also empower police forces to enforce our road traffic laws, and we must look to do everything we can to empower ordinary citizens to engage in this really important issue, because we must ensure that ordinary citizens are in control of our roads, not those who would endanger us all through their selfishness and indeed their criminality through their dangerous and reckless driving. Finally, we must also take responsibility as individuals, and our constituents must also take responsibility. They must take responsibility for driving more safely whenever they can, so that we reduce the number of avoidable, terrible deaths on our roads and, tragically, tens of thousands of serious injuries. And we reduce that number to the lowest possible number possible. And I'm very grateful to my honourable friend for giving us an opportunity to reflect on these important matters and to encourage the government to do everything in its power to ensure that road deaths and injuries are reduced significantly under this government.
To help the Minister prepare, we have 3 more very short backbench contributions, and I call Julia Buckley next.
Thank you,
Deputy Speaker, and thank you again for this excellent and really pertinent debate. And like all members here, we come here with our own horror stories, don't we, from our own constituency and those families who've been in touch with us. And I mentioned that in Shrewsbury it was the family of Harvey Owens who died with 3 other young children aged between 17 and 18 on their trip to Wales, where the driver had been passed for 1 week. And that story is not unfamiliar, because in rural towns and rural areas like mine, where the public services have been decimated, we lost 5,000 bus routes since 2010, which means that 17-year-olds find themselves with no alternative but to learn to drive and to be able to access education, sport and social activities. And that experience is reflected across the country, but it's particularly so in those rural areas where those young drivers aged between 17 to 24 are consistently overrepresented in the statistics. And actually, very distressingly, globally, road traffic injuries are the leading cause of death for young people between the ages of 15 and 29. And 1 in 5 drivers will crash within their first year on the road. And there is now a national campaign group called Forget Me Not, bringing together those families who've lost young people. And one of those campaigners, Crystal Owen, the mother of Harvey Owen, who's from my constituency, put together a petition with 22,000 signatures asking the ministers if they would look at some measures to protect particularly young drivers. And the minister here very graciously gave her time to meet with Harvey's mum and listened carefully to some of those suggestions. Things, for example, such as additional training for young drivers, progressive licensing, safety measures such as Harvey's hammer, a device that could smash open a window if your car is trapped, which would have saved many lives. And this is really pertinent. I know the Minister is working really hard developing that road safety strategy, and I hope that she will hear the messaging that young drivers are 3 times as likely to die, and we must consider them in those safety measures, and in so doing understand that this has a stronger prevalence in rural areas. Members may also be pleased to hear that today I've been granted a Westminster Hall debate which will look at road safety measures particularly to protect young drivers, and I hope you will join me on Tuesday the 29th of January at 9:30. And finally, to conclude, again to appeal to the Minister that these policies must go hand in hand with the other work that we're doing to increase public transport, particularly in rural areas. It must be a viable alternative, and the Minister knows she will join me in my dream. My dream for Shrewsbury is, of course, that we have those evening buses, and my actual dream is that we have a Sunday service. That is the thing that will encourage young people to embrace public transport rather than risking their lives on their roads. Thank you.
As a rural Member of Parliament, I tend to be sharing your dreams there as well. So the next speaker is Jodie Gosling.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Deputy Speaker, and thank you for bringing this important debate, my honourable friend. I heard tonight many passionate arguments about why our roads should be safer and the deaths waiting to happen and preventable. But I've been involved in a situation where the death actually happened. And even after an 11-year-old was killed on our roads, we still had to fight and campaign with the grieving mother in order to try and get improvements to the road. Harley James was killed at 11 years of age during his first half-term from secondary school. His mum had to campaign the County Council in order for improvements on that road. It took 2.5 years. We were told again that the mean average speed on the road of 38 miles an hour was within the expected range, despite the fact that the 5 miles an hour during the school times and 80 miles an hour at 8 o'clock at night were recorded in the speed data. The data is not consistent. We were also told by the safety officer during our campaign that they had 50 roads that marked the similar speed characteristics of ours and only funding for 2. The preventable death could have been done. We knew it was dangerous. The community had said so. The community campaigned, and I can guarantee that nobody knows more about that road than the mother of that child who has campaigned ever since. We need to be listening to these people in order to stop these things happening again. Thank you.
Very powerful indeed. Final contribution, Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I welcome this very important debate on road safety prevention and community involvement. And I'd just like to raise 4 areas of concern that are brought to me by the constituents of Portsmouth North that could be prevented. One is abandonment of vehicles. Abandoned cars are being left routinely on the sides of the road in my constituency, particularly around car dealerships. No MOTs, no insurance, sit there for weeks. Cause a hazard because of the schools around the area having to walk round them and from there. And one constituency contacted the local council to be told not their responsibility, go to the police. Then the police said go to the DVLA said go back to the council. somebody needs to take some responsibility, and it's vital. The other one is congestion. Congestion around cars just pulling up in bus lanes where there are no double yellow lines. Again, these are around hospitals and jam-packed buses. People can't get in and out, causing delays and also causing accidents and damages to vehicles. In addition, we have congestion caused by narrow streets and roads, which also cause accidents as they're used as rat runs with cars going right the way down. One particular group of residents in Oakwood Road have been pushing for a one-way street. There are speed bumps, but the one-way street would help with the flow of traffic, but also help with safety. It's right by a school. And finally, one that I want to address very seriously is zebra crossing safety and the lack of signage around those, which means that they are ignored. And we've got one particularly in Baffins, which is right next to a sixth form college and by schools, where hundreds of pupils cross every day, and very often those zebra crossings are ignored.
I call the Minister. Minister Lilian Greenwood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I take this opportunity to wish you a happy new year. I'd like to congratulate my honourable friend on securing this debate and thank him for continuing to raise the issue of road safety in his constituency. And I'm pleased and somewhat surprised, I suppose, to see so many honourable friends here to contribute to this vitally important discussion about reducing deaths and injuries on our roads. It is really very welcome that we've had this opportunity of rather extra time than we might have expected for an end-of-day adjournment debate. This government is committed to road safety because the issue contributes to every single one of our national missions. Safer roads enable economic growth and opportunities. They support greener journeys through active travel. They reduce pressures on our National Health Service, and they help people travel without fear. My honourable friend very clearly describes the impact that road danger has on local residents in Rossendale and Darwin, and other honourable friends have made equally valuable points, particularly highlighting the impact on children and their ability to travel safely and to make those vital journeys just in school and in their local communities. More than 4 people lose their lives every single day on our roads, and we know, as a number of members have said, that most of these deaths are avoidable. The result of excess speed, driving under the influence of drink or drugs, and frequently both, using a mobile phone behind the wheel, or not wearing seatbelts. My honourable friend is right to raise concerns about those who do not use our roads appropriately and place themselves and others in harm's way. In my short time as Future of Roads Minister, I've read too many heartbreaking accounts of loss and serious injury, and we've heard more examples this evening, including from the Honourable Member for Bury St Edmunds and Stowmarket, who is not in his place now, and I can't comment on the specifics of that case, but of course I'd be happy to meet him to discuss his concerns. I've spoken to grieving family members rightfully demanding change, and I thank the Honourable Member for Rugby for speaking on behalf of his constituents this evening and for the work that he and they are doing to campaign on this issue. And my honourable friend for Nuneaton for the work that she has done in her constituency and with her constituents. Both the Transport Secretary and I are determined to make our roads safer for everyone who uses them. The lack of progress on road safety over the past decade has been inexcusable. There has been no direction and no long-term vision, and this is reflected in the statistics, with drink driving deaths at their highest levels in 15 years. In 2022, around 300 people were tragically killed where at least one driver was over the drink drive limit. That represents 18% of all fatalities. In the same year, there were 203 people killed in a road collision where at least one deceased driver had an impairment drug detected. That was 13% of all fatalities. We need to tackle these illegal behaviours. And as the Secretary of State has stated, tackling reckless behaviour on the roads is a priority for her and for us. Because these statistics, more than 1,600 deaths a year, almost 300,000 serious injuries, are not inevitable. Now, our Think campaign continues to address key priorities around drink driving, speeding and seatbelts. Our innovative campaigns around positive choices and the power of peer influence are targeted at young men aged 17 to 24, a group which is 4 times more likely to be killed or seriously injured on our roads. My honourable friend for Shrewsbury spoke about her constituent, Crystal Owen, who lost her son Harvey in absolutely heartbreaking circumstances, and I look forward to the debate that she has secured. These life-saving behaviour change campaigns matter, and we will continue to work on them. Now, turning to my honourable friend's important points on community road safety interventions. Traffic authorities have the responsibility for making decisions about the roads that they manage. This includes measures to protect the safety of road users based on their knowledge of their area and taking into account local needs and considerations. And this must include listening to local communities. My honourable friend for Birmingham, Erdington, made an important contribution about a dangerous road in her constituency, and I'm sure that her concerns and those of her local constituents will have been heard by the relevant local authority and indeed the Mayor of the West Midlands. Traffic authorities are best placed to make these decisions, but my department also has a really important role. We need to set the enabling legislation and national policy objectives, provide good practice, guidance and, of course, vital funding. Now, I agree with my honourable friend that the risk rating of a road should be a consideration when designing road safety interventions. Since 2017, the Safer Roads Fund has provided £185.8 million funding to address danger on 99 high-risk roads, working with the relevant local authorities to reduce fatalities and serious injuries. This programme has provided vital infrastructure interventions wherever they are needed the most. And of course that takes into account those who are killed and seriously injured, but also traffic flow and the potential hazards on a road. It's really important work. And a number of honourable members to this evening have rightly highlighted the dangers on rural roads, including yourself, Madam Deputy Speaker. We also need to look to the future and understand how new technologies can help prevent future collisions. And my honourable friend talked about some of the international comparisons and how we might draw on those in the future. Now, when it comes to speed, local authorities have the power to set speed limits on their roads. It's for local authorities to determine what measures are appropriate in individual cases because they have that local knowledge. And they also have a range of traffic management measures available to help them improve safety outside schools. Those include 20-mile-per-hour speed limits, traffic calming and the introduction of school streets where appropriate. And local authorities are able to place advisory part-time 20-mile-an-hour speed limit signs in the vicinity of schools without the need for government approval. Now, I've listened with interest to my honourable friend's suggestion to implement netting off. The previous trial allowed fixed penalty revenue to be used to reinvest into more camera enforcement, and the national scheme that followed this ended on the 1st of April 2007. Funding of cameras was integrated into the local transport plan process at the same time the scheme ended. Now, paying fines and penalty receipts, such as speeding fines, into the consolidated fund is generally considered preferable to ring-fencing or hypothecating funds for specific funding. There's a risk of appearing to create incentives to collect fines and penalty receipts for the sake of generating revenues rather than for the purpose of enforcement and road safety. So it needs very careful consideration if we're to retain public trust in the enforcement of speeding. I'm sure that he is aware that most central government funding for local government is not ring-fenced, and that's so that local authorities can make the best decisions relating to their local priorities. Money from the Consolidated Fund supports general expenditure on public services, and that would include services that motorists will benefit from, such as healthcare, policing, local government grants and transport. Nevertheless, I think he makes an important point, and it is one that I will certainly look into further. The enforcement of road traffic law is also vitally important, and how available resources are deployed is the responsibility, of course, of individual chief officers and police and crime commissioners, taking into account the specific local problems and demands which they face. Now, my honourable friend made important points which I will consider further, and including around the importance of people who drive for a living and the important role that we can play in ensuring that employers take their responsibilities seriously. But turning to the point that my honourable friend raises on tyres, tyre labelling regulations require a new tyre's wet grip performance to be displayed at the point of sale along with other attributes. The ratings are established following standardised tests and presented in a consistent manner that helps the consumer to see the relative performance and make an informed choice. The Market Surveillance Unit in the Driver and Vehicle Standards Agency checks new car tyres supplied into the market are accurate with respect to their assigned wet grip, fuel efficiency and external noise ratings. The unit has also worked closely with trading standards relative to part-worn and retreaded tyre sellers, supporting any sanctions they may take in respect of non-compliance. And the DVSA welcomes intelligence about part-worn and retreaded tyre compliance. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last Labour government halved the number of people killed on our roads each year. But under the Conservatives, that progress stalled with only a 12% reduction between 2010 and 2023. This is a legacy that my government is determined to put right. And that's why we've announced that we are developing a new road safety strategy, the first in over a decade. I can assure my honourable friends that we will continue to use the safe system approach to support our thinking, be evidence-based and ensure responsibility for tackling this problem is shared amongst policymakers, those who enforce our laws, those who design our roads and those who use them. And we will be setting out next steps in due course. My honourable friend made a number of really important points in his contribution, and I will be working with officials to consider them further as we continue the work in this area. I'll be pleased to keep in touch with my honourable friend and indeed with other honourable friends here today as we progress our work on road safety. And I once again congratulate him and them, him for securing this important debate and everyone who has made a contribution this evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Now, the question is that this House do adjourn. If those in opinion say aye. Aye. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.